Welcome back to the Wild Ones podcast, a show where we chat about bike stuff. I'm Jimmy, and this week I am joined by producer Emily.
Hello.
And Nick the Mechanic. What's happening, Nick?
Not much. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm not as fatigued as I thought I would be after the weekend. I'm feeling pretty good.
Or after that 7 minutes of riding.
7 minutes and 33 seconds with a 20-minute warm-up, I'll add.
Okay, fair enough.
I say warm-up, it didn't do much good.
Do you want to tell the listeners what you were doing?
Yes, I would love to. Although if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably had enough of it by now. So I'm officially like a national level competitor now. I represented myself in the British National Hill Climb Championships 2024, which happened to be based very local. I've already mentioned it on the podcast before, so if you are a regular listener, you will know that. If you follow me on Instagram, as I said, you will know it, and you will probably wish we weren't talking about it anymore, but we're gonna. So yeah, I had a good time. I had a great time. I don't know what the fuss was all about. It's just like riding up a hill.
I reckon I could have easily won it, but I'm not British, so...
Well, you're not allowed to come.
I'm not allowed to, yeah.
It's a good excuse. Good excuse. Shout out to Muckle CC and CTT who hosted this year's Nationals. It was an absolute mint event. It was in Hexham, just up the road from us, which was very nice because we didn't have to go very far. The open category was won by a good friend of ours, Harry Mack. He's been on this channel before and he's an absolute legend. He beat the defending champion, Andrew Feather, by 2 seconds, a whopping 2 seconds. And apparently did 8.8 watts per kilo for 3 minutes and 9 seconds. I think it was an average of 610 watts for the 3 minutes. The women's category was won by Illy Gardner, and it's actually the 3rd year in a row that she has won it.
Yeah, and I think it was the same podium as last year as well, 2nd and 3rd place on the women's as well. They are strong. I think we can already do our fluff up of the week. And you sort of mentioned it. The hill climb was something like 40 minutes away from our house, and one of our very good friends won it. And we didn't make a video this year. The last couple of years we've been there weighing bikes and stuff like that. And this year was a prime video making time, but we didn't do it, did we?
Well, no, because I wanted to enjoy the event. I didn't want to work and make a video. Yeah,
true. And also Francis wasn't here, so we were disadvantaged a lot on the manpower front, so I wasn't prepared to do it all myself. So we enjoyed the time, didn't we? But we can talk about it now. We can relive the experience. Yeah. So Harry's bike got a lot of attention, didn't it?
It is a very unique looking bike. It's almost like the opposite of my Grosier. So it's a stripped back black raw carbon, and he's got basically all of his mates, including us, to write on it with a white pen, and he says he's eventually going to get it lacquered. And this was started before it was the national champs bike. So yeah, there's some very bold statements on the bike. If you're easily offended, don't look too closely, is probably the correct way of saying it.
I think I saw in Cycling Weekly or Road CC, one of them, they referred to it as like a GCSE student's notepad, and it is very much like that. That is the caliber of graffiti that's on there. But it's also, I think an interesting thing about it is it's a 16-year-old bike, which Harry bought secondhand off Facebook Marketplace for something like 1,900 quid.
It's, I think, a 2008 Cervelo RSL, I think, okay. if that's a bike. I bought it like this, like stripped and everything.
It was from someone he knows that was selling it, and it was already stripped back to carbon. So I think it was already a hill climb bike, and then he took it on as his one. The group set on it, I think, is a SRAM Red in very much hill climb mode, which again is not a new one. It was an old one that was on it. It's about 10 years old. So it's mega light, but it's not super modern tech. When you look at some of the other people's bikes that are out there, they are astronomically expensive.
Yeah, so Andrew Feather, who was the defending champion from last year, he came in second. Also an incredible competitor, no disrespect to him. He was on a SWI, which is allegedly worth £17,500 or something like that.
A lot of money for a bike.
That's what I read, and I was like, really? I sort of suspect that he probably didn't pay for all of that himself. I feel like he's a man of the media. He gets a lot of attention when he rocks up because he's a bit of a superstar in that field, I think.
Yeah.
But I think what it really goes to show is you don't need the newest stuff. You don't need the fanciest stuff. You just need the best legs on the day.
I mean, I put a disclaimer in over there that, yes, obviously he came second place on a much more expensive bike. But if you compare the two bikes in terms of for all round just riding a bike, there's a big difference. Where Harry's would be really fast going uphill because it's light, it's stiff. It's got the old SRAM rate, but it's rim brake. Where Andrew's bike is disc brake. It's all modern technology. Those S or SWE as they call it frame sets.
Right.
They do a special way of, it's the first only full monocog frame set. So they're carbon, they do 14 layers of carbon for every millimeter of frame set. Where somebody like Specialized, for instance, would run 4 layers. So it's not just a light bike, it's incredibly technologically advanced bike, but it's a lot of money.
Sounds to me like it is completely and utterly unnecessary.
Well,
For hill
apparently so.
climbing, possibly yes, but I think if you're going to buy, if you wanted to buy, I think what they're trying to say is if you want to buy a modern bike that is still really light, like the old, I mean, rim brakes are always going to be, if you want to build a light bike, rim brakes.
So I guess the message that we like from this with someone like Harry is you don't need the best.
And he had a full English breakfast on the morning before.
Yeah.
The race.
He actually didn't have beers the night before, which is quite rare for him, although he was running around Hexham with inflatables on his head.
In his acceptance speech as well, Harry gave a really lovely tribute to a girl called Rachel, who was a good friend of his and ours and Francis's. I'll let you listen to what he said.
Hello. This is quite unexpected, but yeah, it's been a fantastic day. Great day. So I've literally had I think I've had 2 pints, and it feels like I've had 10 because I've had nothing to eat. So I've been like, oh. But yeah, it's been a great day. Thanks to Muckle for putting everything on. Thanks to everyone who's come to support, and all the riders and everything, and obviously the Nationals is. I think the hill climb scene is the best scene. It's not elitist. It's it's all about community, and yeah, we're just having a great time. And thanks. I do just want to say one more thing. I know. Oh, Jesus Christ! Jesus. Yeah, there we go. I just want to say one quick thing. I know everyone's very very cold, but I have a very short story to tell you. I think the first hill climb I did was the Nationals 2020. And I had a good friend who drove me to the Nationals a few days prior. We went and recce'd it and had a great time. And the morning of the Nationals 2020, unfortunately, we woke up to a message that she had unfortunately taken her own life. Sorry to put a bummer on this, but I thought if I'd ever won the Nationals, I would devote this to her. So this is to my late friend Rachel.
So yeah, I think that really touched a lot of people, and it was so well deserved as well.
Yeah, it was.
Do you want to tell us anything about your bike, Jimmy?
Yes, I would love to tell you about my bike. I think I got given an entry to the National Hill Climb probably because they thought it was a good opportunity for some PR to be done, rather than because of my hill climbing palmares. So although I paid to get I paid for my entry, there was no official expectation that we would cover it in any way. Well, we're always going to have a chat about it on the podcast. I did it on my steel Moss bike, which I built up with an old rival group set. The bike originally, we built it up for last year's Nationals at about 6.7 kilos. And then for whatever reason, it's ended up being rebuilt and it ended up being about 10 kilos. I had spares on it. I had my frame pump. I had a bottle of wine on the down tube. I had my vintage Nike shoes on. I wore jean shorts and a t-shirt, and I had a great time. I was thinking about this. Belgium cyclocross, whenever you think about Belgium cyclocross, it is rowdy. There's huge crowds. Everyone's having a great time. People are on the beers. People are eating food. It's a day out. It's having a great time. I feel like hill climbing in Britain is like cyclocross in Belgium. The crowd is super rowdy. Everyone's out for a good time. It's so noisy. It's like the big mountaintop finishes of the Tour de France where the crowd are all over the place. I nearly got taken out with a flag. In the moment, I wasn't happy about it. Now I think it was hilarious and it would have been funny had I been taken out by a flag, especially because it was one of the bootleggers. It's just such a good vibe, isn't it? If you want to go to and see a bike race, go to a hill climb, you are guaranteed to have some lols.
The atmosphere is good. I just think you got cheated. They should have had a compulsory, you have to stop, replace an inner tube before you can continue up the hill. You would have won easily.
I definitely would have won.
Because I think you're the only one that had an inner tube with you.
I'm very certain I was the only one which had spares of them.
Did you?
Yeah, did you not see?
No.
Some lad even borrowed his frame pump at the top afterwards to inflate his tyre to get home.
Are you going to do it next year, Emily?
No.
Were you inspired?
No.
How about you, Nick?
No chance. It was fun to watch it, but yeah, no, I've got no desire. I'll ride down the hill. And this year we actually got to see some of the hill climb. Last year for filming it, I didn't see a single bit of the entire day.
Yeah. The worst way to experience a hill climb is to film it, isn't it?
And even though those bikes are light, it took me about 2 weeks to recover from picking up 70 bikes.
In other news, Recycle Your Bike hit their fundraising target of £15,000. So a massive thank you to anyone watching this that has donated. I think it'll probably be closed by the time that this podcast goes out. It's over 15,000, about £15,500, and it is going to make a huge difference. And we're going to get some bikes into people's hands for free. So thank you very much.
Well done.
So what's been making the headlines this week? Rapha revealed they made a £21 million operational loss last year. It's not necessarily anything out of the ordinary for the brand, as it's their 7th loss-making year in a row. However, their latest financial statement does show that their turnover dropped by £8 million compared to the previous year. They say they had 30,000 fewer new web customers last year, and RCC membership dropped by 4,000 people. They put it down to ongoing turbulence and the competitive post-pandemic cycling sector, as well as a decreased consumer confidence in several key markets. But don't worry, it's unlikely that we'll see Rapha going anywhere based on these figures. Independent auditors say it's all good. There's nothing to worry about. They're going to be fine.
Yeah, I just don't agree with this at all.
You don't agree with it?
Yes. Well, no, I agree. I mean, I assume the statement's correct. I just don't see how a company that can run such massive losses for 7 years in a row is allowed to carry on going. And I get that their owners might have a lot of money and can back them, and that's why they're saying there's no risk of it closing down. But from a bike shop perspective, I just feel that there's a lot of other small brands and people trying to do stuff, and these people are taking money out of their coffers to some extent by... So every time somebody buys a Rapha jacket or a Rapha kit, that means somebody's not buying somebody else's kit who's possibly trying to run a business where it's their livelihood, where these guys are just, well, let's just lose 21 million quid in a year, every year, carry on like this, and it just carries on. I don't know. I might be wrong. I might be coming from the wrong side, but I just don't think...
I mean, I would say, unfortunately, that is capitalism for you. They're not a charity. They don't have to... They don't have to...
I completely get it. I just think that
it's
it's one of those things of... It's just not right, in my opinion.
But the hard thing as a layperson to understand is how does a business keep going when it looks like they have an operational loss year on year? But it's a bit more complex than that, isn't it? There's actually not that much that we can interpret from figures like this.
The accounts will never show a real true picture of what's going on. They're obviously a very large business. They still turned over, I think it was £108 million, which is an astronomical amount of money. It'll put them as one of the biggest businesses in the country. They're obviously very sophisticated. They've got proper, very significant financial planning there. To an extent, their accounts will be managed based on how they need them to look for what they're doing. It's all it'll be part of their financial planning. If auditors have no concerns, then there's just nothing to worry about. It's how they're running their business.
I read the article. Auditors have no concerns because their parent company will be able to fund them for another year.
Yeah. I think the actual most interesting bit of this, and the only sort of real facts that we have when it comes to what's going on at Rapha, is they say they have 30,000 fewer new web customers than last year. RCC memberships have dropped. So that's kind of a black and white picture of what's going on, isn't it? They're not seeing the same demand for their products as in previous years. And I don't think that this will be anything that's unique to Rapha. It probably, what it shows is the cycling industry downturn isn't over yet.
Yes, I very much agree with that. And I agree that is the significant thing here. They still have a lot of customers. They still have a lot of customers that are still spending the same amount of lifetime money with them. They just have less customers, which is what we would expect.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Did you see in the report, how much do you think that a Rapha customer on average spends over a lifetime?
£4,000?
No, £600.
600, so it's not a lot.
It's not a lot, but I guess...
But obviously in multiples.
If you have 30,000 fewer people, they're not all spending that £600 in 1 year, but if you're not onboarding them, then your
forecasting has to change.
Your forecasting has to change significantly, doesn't it? Yeah.
But this is the thing, they're a very sophisticated business. They will be forecasting for many years into the future based on what's happening now.
Totally.
But this rolls over into loads of other businesses. You get in the normal bike shop industry as well, where you get some online shops go there and they're happy to trade at the less than 5% margin.
Yes, yeah.
And they do this in bulk and they sell all these things and they run at a loss and then they all flop like ProBike Kit did, Wiggle did, Chain Reaction, all these places. But every time they're doing that, they're doing another small shop that needs the money to pay for employees and staff are losing a sale to these people.
There's definitely a ripple effect in that sense.
It just shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? They have, businesses like this have deep pockets, deep enough pockets to weather storms like that, and they will do stuff like if you have a lot of stock sitting in a warehouse, it's better to make some money off it and get rid of it, even if it's at a tiny margin, even if it's at a loss sometimes. It costs you money to hold stock, and therefore sometimes it's better to just get rid of it. However, as you say, that has a knock-on effect for
somebody else here, yeah?
We have heard some very significant speculative rumours that another large apparel business is potentially on the ropes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that over the next 6 to 12 months.
Cryptic.
We were actually talking about this the other day, and I think just the industry as a whole, and it feels like the businesses that didn't have very well managed cash flow have probably already gone pop.
Yep.
And the ones that do have well managed cash flow are able to weather the storm, but are having a significant decrease. It still feels like we are not at the bottom.
My other thing that I wonder is, if you look at all the numbers, like Redley was telling us and a few other brands, that gravel's up massively worldwide.
Yeah.
And a lot of the gravel riders don't wear Lycra.
Yeah, totally.
They wear T-shirts. And I mean, I've been wearing tech tees. It's much more comfortable than a Lycra jersey for me. And they cost pennies.
I think it's also probably down to competition. You make a good point. Potentially less people are buying kit who are already into cycling. But also there's so much more competition now, isn't it? Like the rise of the decathlons and that kind of thing. They're like Van Rysel range. This is not an ad for them before anyone wants to start. But having been in there and seen the quality of clothing they're doing for significantly undercutting. And Rapha has changed their business model on that as well, because they used to be premium. And they responded to the change in market by bringing in like their core range, for example. But there's still more businesses coming in who are undercutting and still selling what looks to be a premium product. And I think, again, it's just part of this industry bubble popping.
I do have a theory that I think bike brands are also going to react.
Yeah.
I think we are going to see better value bikes starting to show up, because there'll always be the super high-end bikes. They are never going to go away. But I think that brands are starting to realize that they do need a £500 bike that is good and a £1,000 bike that is good, and they can no longer get away with a £1,200 bike that's actually not that good. And I think we are going to see better bikes, better spec'd bikes and better quality bikes in the bottom end of the price range.
This is something I discussed with lads came to visit from Zip in 2019, I think it was, and saying to them, but a lot of brands, they shouldn't forget this, because if you don't have an entry to market item, Mavic was always really good for this, because you could buy a wheel set for £100, but you can also buy a wheel set for £4,000. So essentially somebody gets that first bike that's not too expensive with their product on it, and they like it. If it's good value and it worked well, when they want to upgrade, like, well, the Mavic worked well, just buy the nicer Mavic wheels. Or I buy a low-end Giant. It's a really nice bike. I've got a bit more money now. I'm going to buy a nice bike. Just buy a Giant again. If you don't have that, you don't have the entry to market.
Yeah.
So if the bike brands don't start doing this, they're never going to, because it's aspirational for some of the wheels like lightweight. It's very few people buy them because you can't get into that market for under £3,000.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, yeah.
I actually think that's one of the reasons that Specialized have always been so iconic. Is they were always, so many people bought a Specialized as their first bike. I'm an example of that as well. Because even now, I still look at S-Works and I go, I just kind of want one. I don't think I will ever buy one ever because I can't bring myself to buy an S-Works, especially at the price. But it doesn't stop me wanting one, and it almost certainly will have this kind of connection to when I started riding.
Yeah, they're gonna have to bring a cheaper, but good. It can't be a cheap, terrible bike. It has to be a good bike, because otherwise you're just gonna be like, well, that is terrible. I'm not gonna buy. Why would I spend more money on one of them? But yeah.
That's what I think is going to happen. And perhaps Q's is going to be one of the ways. So Shimano's Q's might be a way that this can then start coming around, because I'm confident Q's is going to be a great group set, and it'll allow a cheaper, or also the Microshift Sword, which is also a great group set. I think we might see that starting to be spec'd on bigger brands' bikes as well.
So next, British cycling legend Sir Chris Hoy recently revealed some very sad personal news, that he has stage 4 prostate cancer and may only have 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris said the news came as a huge shock, but has given him a deep resolve to turn his difficult diagnosis into something positive. And he's definitely done that already, because since his announcement, searches for prostate cancer symptoms advice on the NHS website have risen by 672%. After hearing this news, his wife Sarah said he's likely saved countless lives and called him a real-life superhero. So well done, Sir Chris. We've talked before on this show about the symptoms of prostate cancer. I think actually that was one of the last times you were on this show, Nick. It's our yearly reminder, and sort of saying how early detection gives the best chance of successful treatment. And actually since then, we've also had people write to us and say thank you. One of them came this week from a listener called Lauren from Australia, who said her husband, who couldn't care less about bikes, was pretending not to listen in the dining room to our episode where we talked about men's health. He then booked himself in for a checkup where he was thankfully found to have a benign prostate enlargement, and now he jokes about getting free touch-ups every 12 months. She says she's super thankful he didn't listen to that podcast.
That is class. And just a reminder to the guys that are listening, if you are worried about anything, go and get yourself checked out.
There was one other big piece of news to come out this week, and that is that ITV, which is a station in the UK, is going to stop broadcasting the Tour de France after 2025, which means that UK viewers will probably no longer get free Tour de France coverage. Now, we're not actually going to speak about that this week because we have a very special guest who is very well placed to talk about that, who we are filming with on Sunday, ready for next week's podcast. So we will talk about it then. I'm going to leave it hanging.
Oh, I'm so ready to talk about it now as well.
Stay tuned for next week. It's going to be good.
I would argue that it is going to be our most high-profile guest ever yet.
Yeah, Wild Ones podcast going big places.
Sorry, Nick. Right, time for a big question. So if you live somewhere where the weather's changing for the worse right now, you're probably thinking about getting your bike ready for winter. So since we've got Mechanic Nic with us, we thought we'd ask him what 5 things he does to his bike every winter so he is primed and ready to get out there and keep riding bikes.
Well, obviously this is for up here where the weather's bad, and probably a lot of other countries as well. Yeah. First thing that's most important is service your bike. If you're going to only service your bike once a year, I would suggest doing it right before winter starts so that everything is greased and as waterproof as possible. Your number one thing that's going to get you on a bike is corrosion. So corrosion to bottom bracket bearings, headset bearings, wheel bearings. Bearings is probably the main thing. Then your chain, brake pads, things like that. It's just going to get hammered, especially with the salt on the roads they've got up here and in most countries where it freezes overnight.
I was just about to say, on the subject of grease, something I find really, really annoying about social media and just marketing to bikes in general is this spinning the crank thing. So there's this idea that you put a ceramic bearings in your bike, you spin the cranks around, they spin for ages. but it's ultimately, if it's not greased, it's going to spin. Like I used to WD-40 all of my bearings because I thought it was faster. And it does, it just rolls for ages, but that doesn't actually mean it's a good thing. So like grease is important.
But well, the other thing with that is obviously not to bore you with it, but those cranksets are spin so fast in some of them bearings. Ceramic speed is a good example for it. If you take a ceramic speed bearing, lift it up to a light, you can see through the seals. The seals don't touch. So essentially water is just going to get in and then it's going to corrode. So grease, yes. For winter, if you live in about, like, yes, it's when it says slow you down, it's going to slow you down in less than a watt that you're going to lose. Put waterproof grease in. There's different grease also, not just all grease works, but as a minimum, just get your bike serviced.
I was going to say, if you are getting your bike serviced, a mechanic is going to presumably
most of the time, yes. Yeah, presumably use a good grease. That I would say is the main thing. If you can, opt for stainless steel bearings. Just because anything stainless steel, anything that's corrosion resistant, don't fall for ceramics, because if the outside of the bearing isn't corrosion resistant, then that's not going to help. So just keep the rust out. Second thing is, which I don't do properly, is fit mud guards. I use the Saver Wind Wing because it keeps me dry, but doesn't keep anybody else dry. I think most cycling clubs and most of the people who ride with you would prefer if you go for full mud guards. Something I really don't like.
But I guess not all bikes are going to fit full mud guards, are they?
No, but yes. I mean, they've got their pros and cons. All I'd say is if you do fit full mud guards, make sure you wash your bike properly after ride. So that's the next thing. Wash your bike. Washing your bike is probably the most underrated thing you could do in the winter. If you wash it after every single ride, clean it, you are just going to prolong the life of everything. Obviously, there's a caveat to this. Don't be pressure washing all the grease out of all your bearings and head to the bottom bracket again. So just use a bucket, a sponge, hot water, some soap, clean your bike.
We have a 5-minute bike clean video, I think, that Francis and myself made maybe last summer or something or other. So if you want to know how to clean your bike really quickly, watch that video.
Don't use the soap from your dishes like you guys do. But
I have had 0 issues in 15 years.
I think we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one.
So yes, another one that I'm really...
Sorry, is drying your bike also important?
Yes, if you don't store your bike wet in your outdoor shed, that's just going to be cold. I mean, the bike has to dry off. Essentially, it all comes back down again to you want to stop corrosion, stop rust, make sure the bike doesn't rust. Yes, drying definitely helps a lot. If you can store your bike indoors, inside your house, that's even better. I know there's a lot of partners of people listening to the show who's not going to like the idea, but it'll save you a lot of money.
I would say I clean my bike much more in winter than I do summer. In summer, I basically don't clean it at all. And then in winter, but I don't even clean it properly in winter. Just hose it down and then dry it is usually what I do.
Yes. Summer obviously is not going to get as dirty and mucky, and you can get away longer without it. You don't want to over clean a bike, but in winter, just clean your bike quite regularly. Another one that's quite interesting is wax, chain wax. It doesn't work in the winter. So I know loads of people are going to get upset about this, but it doesn't work in the wet. So if you are waxing in the summer for those speed gains and things like that, in the winter, I would suggest switch back to oil.
How does it not work? Because it surely...
So everybody talks about immersion wax and all these things and how long it lasts in miles, but they all say it's based on conditions. Mm-hmm. So if it gets wet, it just wears off your chain much quicker. But also doesn't... If you do chain waxing properly, you have to degrease and decontaminate your entire drivetrain to wax your chain, to get all the efficiency out of it and to get the wax to stick. But that means your cassette, your pulley wheels, half your derailleur, everything else doesn't have a coating of oil or protection from corrosion on it. So it will just rust.
Presumably, if you're using chain lube, though, you're having to reapply it quite often if it's bad conditions.
But after every wash, yeah.
It's a lot easier to do that than it would be to...
wax the chain, yeah. But also, it'll stop everything else in your bike from corroding. So that's a big tip. Next one would be suitable tires. One of those, everybody likes race tires because they're faster. Tires gives you probably the most speed on a bike. But in winter, the last thing you want to do is fixing a puncture next to the road when you've got cold hands and it's freezing. So I would say opt for something that's arguably slightly less comfortable, not as fast, but has a bit more puncture resistance and more grip. Make sure there's a big thing to look into as well. Rubber generally below 5 degrees Celsius hardens up. So they actually become less safe. That's why cars, you get winter tires. When you buy bike tires for the winter, just make sure you buy a tire that's actually rated to work in cold.
Do you have any
temperatures as well.
recommendations on anything like that?
I personally really like Michelin. Victoria does a ride armor that's really good. But obviously it's difficult. I'm not the best person for this because our shop deals with more premium brands and tires. Speak to your local bike shop. They can give you advice on that. I would also run bigger tires because the biggest tire your frame set can take, you're going to get more, you can run low pressures, which can give you extra grip.
I would say in that section, if you are going to get a pump in winter, a frame pump is so much better than one of those little tiny ones,
things,
or even gas, because gas can be fiddly. If you've got a frame pump, you just chuck it on, bosh, 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 you're on the road again. And there are tons of cheap options. The Topeak, is it pronounced Topeak?
Topeak, yeah.
They have a frame pump that used to cost £15. I don't know how much it costs now. It's probably not that much more than that. It's so good. It just works.
They do a thing called a mini morph as well, which I used to use back in the day when I was riding on the road quite a lot. And it's almost like a mini foot pump that goes onto your bike. So it's got a little foot adapter that you can stand on. And it's just, what you want to do is minimize the amount of time you're spending in the cold trying to fix a puncture.
Have you used the studded tyres? I've always wanted to try studded tyres. I think you've got a set in the shop now,
I bought a
haven't
set
you?
last year because it's difficult to get tubeless ones for gravel that could fit into my bike. And I got a set, but then it never got icy enough.
What size are they?
They're 2.1 inch, 650B.
So they'll fit on my howler?
Yes. I've got 2 sets in the shop.
I might have to have a set off you.
They weigh 1 kilo each. But I just figured last year on the coast to coast where it's overcast, where we ride up to your house, there's just icy patches everywhere. And I was just sick and tired of crashing. So yeah, I got some of them. Another road tip, which a lot of people, Mickey was asking me the other day, am I just having him on? But if you ride in winter and it's all in the wet and the rain, rub your tires. Now I'm going to put a disclaimer, obviously practice it before you do it at speed. But what I do is when I ride every few miles, I just put my hand on top of the tire while riding and then rub it.
So that any glass that's stuck in your tire will slash your hand.
I won't. Well, in 25 years of doing this, I haven't slashed my hand. I've had tiny cuts possibly. But essentially, what happens is glass doesn't actually puncture your tire immediately. So when it's wet, it sticks a bit more. But glass generally sticks to your tire. And then as you roll, it keeps rolling. It pushes in further and further and further until it punctures. So even in dry weather, if I ride through a patch of glass on the road, I would touch my tires because generally speaking, you would just rub it off.
So the principle of this piece of advice, I like. The application, no one should do, especially whilst riding.
Wear gloves. I've got an actual, I don't know, I've got a terrible story. This is back home in South Africa. We're riding towards, there's a place called Hartbeespoort. It's a motorway, which I don't think is legal to ride on, but we used to ride on it every Sunday at high speeds. And the one day we're going down at about 45, 50 kilometers an hour. And once again, went through glass. But instead of touching the top of my rear tire, I put my hand in between the seat tube and the tire. And I could feel this piece of glass with my finger. So I thought it wasn't coming out. So I used my mittens and I had my gloves. And I stuck my hand in, but I pushed a little bit too hard. My hand got lodged in between the tire and the down tube and locked up. And I had a horrible, horrible crash with my hand stuck in the bike.
So thank you for giving us a reason why no one should actually listen to any of your advice.
Yeah, terrible advice. I mean, to be fair though, if I was to ride through a patch of glass, I would probably just pull over and check my tyres before. That's maybe a safe way for us to
sensible way of doing
offer
it.
that bit of advice.
And then lastly, something just I do is if you don't have a saddle bag underneath your saddle, if you've got most modern saddles have a cutout, tape the cutout closed. Because if you don't have mud guards on, that's just going to spray water. Wet chamois is not a nice thing to have.
Even with a smaller, like Saver or something, I think a bit gets through. Because I do the same thing. I tape the hole closed.
It just blocks it, yeah. So that's probably the last tip.
Nice.
Should I summarize those? So the first one was get a bike service. The second was fit mud guards. That can be just clip-on ones if needs be. Third one was keep your bike clean. The fourth one was get suitable tyres, and the fifth one was close the hole in your saddle. So whilst I was thinking about this topic, there's a couple of other things that I would like to add in which are less mechanic-y, I think. One of One of which would be I always pack away my winter kit. So at the beginning of the season, it's an opportunity to get it out, check it all over, see if all the seams are nice and intact, check the padding on your shorts and look for any missing bits, gloves, because otherwise you might get to the point you're going to go out and do the ride. It's at the coldest point of the winter and you go, oh God, I can't find my deep winter gloves. So just get it all ready and that means you're less likely to miss an opportunity to go out and ride your bike. Bar bags are always a great one. Or just luggage on your bag in general, because you can stuff jerseys in, extra pair of gloves, just gives you flexibility to add more kit, remove kit, food, spares, and less cumbersome in your pockets. Don't overthink or don't think that luggage is a bad thing for a bike. I think it is very useful. You use a frame bag pretty much permanently.
I use it for a spare jacket. Ours mostly because we do these chippy rides where we stop for fish and chips outside, and it's just something warm. But also, if you're on a club ride and somebody has a puncture, you could be stuck there for 10, 15 minutes while somebody's getting something fixed. Having a spare jacket just to keep you slightly warmer while you're standing still, not moving, is excellent. Dry socks. I carry a dry set of gloves as well, just in case it gets completely soaked and you can swap out. Another one is foil for your toes.
Do you do this one?
Yes, Adam does it as well quite a bit. So yes, toe caps. Loads of people buy toe caps to go over the outside of your shoe, and they work really well just to keep your toes slightly warmer. Another hack is just tinfoil. Put tinfoil inside your shoe because if you imagine that's the greatest wind blocker ever. No wind's getting through. That's quite good for springtime when you're still wearing your summer shoes that are usually very vented. Just put a bit of tinfoil.
I think a really good winter tool is have something to look forward to in the spring. And it makes it much easier to get through winter and it not be miserable and horrible. There have been years in the past where I've basically done nothing over winter, and then you get to spring and you're like, I'm so far off the mark that by the time I get fit, the summer will be over. So actually just having something to focus on early in spring, I find is a really, really good tool just to keep going. Whether that be an event or a holiday or just having a group of mates where you're kind of saying, on the 1st of May, we're going to go and do this 100K ride. Even if it's a local one, it doesn't have to be traveling. And it just gives you that little bit of motivation to keep going on and giving your mates a bit of banter so you actually keep motivated to keep doing things over winter. I
find it much easier to train in winter than summer. And it's a weird one, but I just think it's because there's a lot less stuff happening in winter.
Weirdly, I ride more with you in winter. I basically never ride with you in the summer.
There's no events that we have to go to. There's no like Sunday barbecues or things like that. It's cold and wet. So, and also people don't waste time in the winter as much in summer. In the summer, you can go on a ride, and we're out there for 8 hours riding for 2.5 of them because we're stopping around and
that's my
messing
favorite kind
about.
of ride.
When it's cold, you kind of like, let's get out there, get this ride done, and get home.
Yeah.
I feel I train much, much, much better in the winter. I started 3 weeks ago riding my bike again because it's cold now, which is bizarre, but yeah.
Do you have anything else to add?
I've got one to add. Woolly Bully socks. Defeat Woolly Bully socks are the best.
Good stuff.
The best winter socks. I don't use dedicated winter boots. I wear Woolly Bullies, my normal shoes, which are not super vented, and then like a plasticky overshoe, and that's perfect for me. I've
got one last one, which you don't get much up here because it's just really cold. But if you're out there and you are a bit cold and you're struggling to get warm on a ride, if you can stop somewhere, get a bit of newspaper or a brown paper bag and stick that inside your jersey in the front. Because once again, it's just an extra wind stopper. That's going to stop the chill getting to you.
That's like the vintage one, isn't it?
They used to use it for racing because you can, and also at the top of climbs, you climb up to the top and you want to descend. You need something to keep you warm on the way down. But back home in South Africa, we used to have where you start in the morning in winter, it could be 2 degrees, and then within an hour of riding, it's up to 18 degrees. So you don't want to dress mega warm, but a newspaper.
Well, I have just dribbled on myself, so we're now going to have me with dribble on for the rest of the podcast.
Never mind.
Next up is a round of overrated or underrated. I'm going to read out a list of things, and you're going to tell me if they're overrated or underrated. First up, progressive geometry on gravel bikes. Suggested by Matthew, who says, if you want a mountain bike, buy one. I see some new gravel bikes, then the geometry, a head angle so slack it's falling over, and a top tube the length of the M5. The M5 is a massive motorway in this country, if you didn't know.
What does he mean by that? Progressive geometry?
I'm assuming it's the gravel bikes that are basically mountain bikes but with drop bars. Is that what he's getting at?
And a lot of stuff's happening. A lot of the gravel races are now coming out, taking mountain bike frame sets, which I've been wanting to do for 2 years now, and putting drop bars on it. I think the problem is gravel isn't settled yet. People don't know what it's going to develop into, because UCI is doing essentially road racing on slightly dirtier roads. And then there's the gravel we do, which is more mountain biking. I think it's good. I think it's underrated. I think people need to test things out because we're not going to learn. A year ago, everybody was racing on 35mm tires. Dylan Johnson's just come out recently and said, any race bike out there, if you've got a gravel race bike and it doesn't take 50mm tires, you don't have a race bike. They're reckoning it's going to end up at roughly a 2.4-inch tires is where we're going to stop. But nobody's going to know what's faster, what's better until we try out different things. The big difference between a mountain bike and gravel bike is the bars, drop bars. It's slightly more aerodynamic, especially at speed, and you get into a different position. But making your bike smoother makes it faster. So I like the testing. I'm not saying it's all going to work. I think some of the stuff coming out is really stupid, but we only know it's stupid after we've tried it. So
you don't agree with Matthew's point of if you want a mountain bike, just buy one?
No, because the mountain bike's got flat bars. When you're sitting upright like that, it's going to slow you down loads. I love riding mountain bikes. There's a flip side to it as well, is where mountain bikes have gotten, this is what a lot of the old mountain bikers have been telling me recently, is that mountain bikes have gotten so good that even somebody like me that's not good at riding mountain bikes, it's become easy. So you go to the trail center and you can get down there and you don't really get scared because all this massive suspension and slack head angles makes it really smooth. And I find that riding my gravel bike on some of the mountain bike trail centers now is more fun because you get that adrenaline going a little bit.
You definitely do get an adrenaline hit. I do agree with that.
So I don't actually want a mountain bike for the reason that I just like riding my gravel bike over there. So I want to ride the same trails. It is, to some extent, simulating mountain biking from the 90s. But it was fun riding mountain bikes in the 90s. So
great summary. I maybe would have said overrated, but you have argued a case so brilliantly that I'm going to go with underrated as well. Thank you. Next is hydrophobic frame coatings suggested by Chester. I'm assuming this is those sprays.
Ceramic coatings overrated.
It's those spray things.
It's those sprays you put on, apparently keeps your bike clean. But I've never seen it keep a bike clean. And I've been watching videos of these people do it, and they'd stick tape on a frame set, and then they spray the other side with their coating to show how. So it's one side's coated, one side's not, and they pour muddy water on it, and they show you how the muddy water runs off the clean side, but sticks to the dirty side. But what happened there is that if you put tape on a frame and you pull it off, there's going to be a sticky residue on the frame set still. So that's essentially going to skew the way you do this. But at the same time, I've tried a few different ones. It's the same as putting some WD-40 in a cloth and wiping it over your frame. It's going to give a slightly oil-like coating for a very short while. It's going to keep it clean. And then, the only time I would say some of them work is some of them is more like a wax polish where you can put into your frame to kind of cover up tiny holes from years of in your lacquer of your frame. But I've never seen a bike that doesn't need washing because of the coating.
Yeah, I think they're massively overrated.
My stepdad actually rang me a year ago, and he spent like £150 in South Africa to get his bike coated. And I asked him, why did you do that? And he's like, well, to make it easier to wash. I was like, you've not washed your bike in 20 plus years. You take it to the bike shop and you pay somebody there to wash it. So you've gone to a bike shop, paid them to coat your bike to make it easier when you pay them to wash your bike. Where's the logic in this? Unfortunately, I mean, I don't get it. It's overrated.
So what would you say? Just wash your bike?
I haven't seen it work yet.
Yeah.
And I challenge any company that out there does it. Come to the shop. We'll film it. Coat my bike. I'll go on a ride. If it comes back still clean, then I'll put my hands up and say I was wrong. But I can guarantee you it's not going to work.
I quite like that challenge. I quite like it. So we're saying overrated. Next up is expensive helmets suggested by Tom.
Are we allowed to sit on the fence? No, you have to pick
we
one.
aren't allowed to sit on the fence in this game, no.
Okay, so I would say that the price of the helmet doesn't necessarily indicate how good it is at protecting you.
Well, we did that. We talked about a report where in an independent study found that a £45 helmet was the safest in tests, and they had ones that were £100+ So in terms of safety, no.
So I don't think that an expensive helmet means excellent. However, annoyingly, in a number of cases, the more expensive ones look the best.
Yes, so this is exactly what I'm saying. I think expensive helmets are overrated if you look at safety, because they're generally not safer. Because all these things have, as long as it's a helmet made by a reputable company that's had testing,
an appropriate standard,
appropriate standards, it's going to be safe. Bizarrely, a helmet's a fashion accessory. So yes, and I fall in this. I've got probably about 15 helmets, and I like switching them out from ride to ride. I do think if you like the look of your helmet, you're more inclined to wear it than not wearing a helmet. So I think in that sense, expensive helmets, if having to buy a more expensive helmet to convince yourself to wear it, then yeah, underrated massively. But as long as you know that that's why you're doing it, you're not buying a more expensive helmet because you think you're going to go faster.
I guess the important thing here is you don't need an expensive helmet. So if you can't afford an expensive helmet, you're not going to gain anything by pushing yourself or stretching yourself to get one.
My other worries that I have seen is Chris, one of my good friends, Chris Broadbent, is really bad for this. He bought one of them Paul Smith helmets. That's
the cask one.
Yeah, and that was obscenely expensive. But he's been riding it now for like 6 years. The helmet's not safe anymore. But because he spent so much money on it, do you know what I mean? And that's the thing where I say, like, if you're going to buy an expensive helmet, just also know that generally speaking, 3 years or so, or if you bought a brand new helmet and 2 days in, you've dropped it on the floor from a meter down, you need to buy a new helmet.
Yeah.
So, yes,
that's
just be aware of that. Like safety-wise, don't let that stop you from buying or being safe. I have smashed a lot of helmets crashing bikes. It saved my life several times. My worst crash was at 88 kilometers an hour, which I think is 50-something miles an hour, into a barrier where I smashed a helmet into pieces. And I was fine, but without the helmet, I would have been dead. I think a helmet realistically saved my life probably about 4 or 5 times now. So
I'm sure if Francis was here, he would argue that it also, he thinks, makes you
more confident,
behave more dangerously. But I mean, maybe we shouldn't get into that.
Well, we know Nick. He's a lunatic.
Yeah, I imagine you'd be dangerous either way, based on the stories that you've told us.
The one example, though, is 3 years ago, I was riding in winter on a cycle path, just commuting slowly. I must have been going about 2 kilometers an hour through one of them gates behind Gosforth. And as I was going through the gate, I was on a mountain bike at the time as well. My front wheel just slipped. I hit my head off the ground. I was concussed. Without that helmet, I would have been in hospital. Well, I probably should have still gone to hospital with a concussion. But what I'm trying to say is that, no, I've had really fast crashes, but really slow. I don't take extra risks because I've got a helmet on. I just essentially, anything can
always
happen.
Take risks.
Always take risks. That is the Nick mantra.
Nick is dangerous at 2 kilometers an hour is what we're saying. Thank you for those suggestions. If you want to suggest anything for overrated or underrated, send them to wildonespodcast@cademedia.co.uk and we might read yours out in a future episode.
Right, let's do some listeners' takeover. Firstly, a couple of weeks back, Francis talked about the bike brand that ships their bikes inside TV boxes. Lots of you wrote in to tell us that it's Dutch bike manufacturer Van Moof, M-O-O-F, that does this. So CNN and bicycling.com did a piece in 2017 and said the company started doing this because they were finding more than 25% of their bikes were getting damaged before they'd even been delivered. So they asked themselves what would prompt couriers to be more delicate with the parcel. They decided to package the bikes inside boxes that had a picture of the TVs on the side, and apparently they saw damages drop by 80%.
That is amazing.
That's mad, isn't it?
You know how heavy a Van Moof is? Do you know how strong you need to be to throw one of them boxes around? So I don't understand how this is happening.
They're e-bikes, aren't they?
Yes.
So next one is from Justin, who says, "Hi Emily, Jimmy and Nick. I've been going on regular rides for about a year now, but I'm still using flat pedals and my regular trainers. I was wondering what the best pedal and cleat system would be for someone that rides road mainly, but is also considering doing some gravel. I've looked at various Shimano systems, Look, and also Crank Brothers. Anyway, keep up the great pod. I look forward to it every week."
First, before Nick goes through a list of products, because he will be an expert on pedals, you don't need pedals and cleats. If you are getting on really well with flats and regular trainers, you can just stick with that. That is perfectly acceptable. However, if you do feel the need to go on, Nick has got the answer for you.
So I disagree completely with Jimmy. You do need cleats and pedals, only purely for the sense of that your pedal stroke is much better on
Also comfort.
cleat pedals, comfort, performance. I mean, I rode my wife's bike up to the car garage the other day to get our car serviced. Went to go fetch the car. And I rode with my normal trainers up a hill and I almost died. This is a hill that I ride every single week where it usually doesn't affect me. Her bike's lighter than mine as well. Better get everything on it's better. I just feel that you're more connected system. But saying that, that's probably just from years and years of riding. I would go for mountain bike SPD style pedal, so the 2-bolt system, just because if you can do more gravel, that'll work on both. You can ride on the road with it and you can ride off-road with it, where with road pedals, you can have a bad time riding off-road and gravel.
Well, road pedals are just horrible to be anywhere other than clipped in on a bike. They're not nice to walk in. They can be more slippery. A mountain bike pedal and shoe, or specifically the shoe, or a gravel shoe that are now coming out as well, they're just much better for walking around.
I wish I had it on, like I rode my road bike to go and watch you race on the weekend, and I just wish I swapped pedals over. Because then I was there trying to like hobble around in road shoes where my gravel shoes, I could have been running up behind you on the hill.
I was going to say the other great thing about those pedals is that you can clip in on either side. So if you're starting out, I think it's a lower barrier to entry.
Yeah. The second thing you need to think of is road pedals become big because they have more platform engagement, which means there's more stability and your foot engages with more of the pedal, which was always associated with road pedaling, getting more power out. But mountain bike pedals, they try to keep them as small as possible. I would still say if you're going to get a gravel pedal, buy one with a bit of like size to it. It'll be slightly heavier, but it's just easier. If you do want it on the odd day ride with just normal trainers, you can still easily ride on top of it. My favorite, I've ridden all of them. So Shimano, growing up my whole life, Shimano pedals, they make really good SPD pedals.
Super cheap as well.
But I find them uncomfortable. They are quite durable. They work well, but their essential platform size is really small generally. And the engagement to your shoe. So I've got big feet, so I can feel the pressure through my shoe. Look makes a good one. Use the same cleat as Shimano, but they've got more platform stability. So that's just a bigger pedal that's going to give you a bit more support. Your ankle's going to roll less. It's more comfortable for me. But no real downside to them. But at the moment, I'm using Crank Brothers. And the only reason for using Crank Brothers are the pedals are fully serviceable. And a lot of the other brands will say theirs is, but trying to find spares is near impossible. Where Crank Brother pedals, you buy a set of them, you can just take them apart, put them back together.
Do they have a cheap pedal, or are they all expensive?
They're all fairly, I think they start about £60
right.
for a set of pedals.
You can get Shimano SPDs for probably 20 quid, I'm
yes,
guessing.
if you're going to start out on, but also if you buy a set of Crank Brother pedals, you need to remember that it's pedals for life. So essentially, in my opinion, yes, you're going to spend a little bit more, but if they wear out, you just fix them instead of buying new pedals. So you're just weighing up. They're also really easy to clip in and out with the cleats that come with the pedals. To narrow down, stick to a 2-bolt, technically is I think what term to use, cleat system and shoes if you're going to start out, because it's just much easier.
Next one is from Stefan, who would love to know where Jimmy gets his shirts / shackets from. This is not an ad, but we do get this question a lot. So
do we get it a lot?
We do. So can
cool.
you answer it, please, Jimmy?
Pretty much all of them will be from either the majority of stuff. Like the thing I'm wearing now is from Uskies, which I think is a company that are based in Manchester. Not astronomically expensive, but not cheap. But they come with a repair kit. And the idea is that you can just keep repairing it forever and it will last for an eternity. A couple of the others are from M&S. M&S have some really good stuff at the minute. And I've got a couple of things from Primark, whatever you want to call it.
Last one, we also have an email from Ryan with the subject, bikes that look good. It's more important than we want to admit. He says, hi everyone. I recently got my hands on a Trek Madone 8 in white. It's the wrong bike. Also, I added this because I feel this to my bones because I want one of these bikes. He says, it's the wrong bike for me. A semi-casual, slightly overweight, although less since I got the bike, 40-year-old. I should have an endurance bike. However, I like it loads. It's a hoot to ride. You put your feet down and it goes like stink. It's more comfortable than it looks. If I'm honest, I think a big part of why I like it is that it looks absolutely outrageous. Whenever you stop at a coffee shop, other cyclists have a look at it. I'm sure some think it's super ugly, and that's okay. At least it looks like something. In the review you did of the entry-level Trek bike, there was a discussion of how good looking that bike was and whether or not it matters. I think it matters. I always feel really lucky to have the Madone, and I also keep it cleaner than I would if it was less interesting to look at. What bikes have you had or ridden in the past that have made you feel something just by how they look? I know Jimmy has a bike with a custom paint job. Maybe we should upgrade the paint on the bike before the wheels. Thanks, Ryan. I know you have opinions on this, Nick.
Loads.
I think it is so important that... So it has to fit right first. You have to actually be able to ride it and not be uncomfortable. But how it looks, I think, is really, really important to how excited you will be to want to keep riding it. And I think that's why I've ended up with so many unique bikes, because that, for me, is really, really important.
What I would say is, I think that we're always cautious to talk about how something looks because you guys, I say you guys because I only really do this podcast. You guys are doing the stuff with the bikes and you are, for want of a better term, influencers in this industry. And if you're saying that's good looking, that's crap, that's good looking, that's crap, on something as arbitrary and as subjective as looks, number one, I think that causes a bit of upset to people who have those bikes. No one wants to be told that their bike looks ugly. And it's something that's completely subjective. Just because you say their bike is ugly does not mean their bike is ugly.
Totally.
So I always try to instill in you guys. It's why you've joked about, say, like the word ugly is banned, because I just don't think it's appropriate. So that's why we maybe sit on the fence about it. However, I think personally, you do have opinions on what you think looks good and doesn't look good. And it's the same thing as the helmets as well. Just people, there is an amount of style that goes with these things, and people want to look stylish, whatever that means to them.
I think what Ryan has said at the end, I wish was more accessible. So he said maybe we should upgrade the paint on the bike before the wheels. Perhaps not that, but I wish it was easier for people to be able to get their bikes custom painted, because having someone that has done it maybe 4 or 5 times on various bikes, it's so amazing to be part of that process and it to be exactly how you want it. But the costing of it is astronomical, especially if you want something really, really tricked out. A decent amount of that cost actually comes from removing the existing paint and getting the bike prepped to be sprayed. I've sanded down a bike myself and it took, I think it was hundreds of hours, like so many days.
That was the biggest mistake.
It was a very big mistake. But I do agree.
I did warn you.
I wish it was more accessible or easier to actually get a bike sprayed and make it more unique to yourself, because it's such an amazing process to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad he brought up the Trek Madone 8, because this is the exact bike I just had this thought about the other day. It's not for me. I don't think it's an ugly bike at all, though. I do like that it's quite a good... the Look 795 Aeroblade RS is a very similar looking bike. I really like that bike. I think the Madone for me is more of a small things that I don't like, but it's minor. But then what I realized what I don't like about it is that somebody posted a photo the other day with it with really skinny, shallow wheels in it. And it just looked odd for me personally. And that's why I didn't like the look. And then that just made me realize that with the thin wheels, I know we can't use the word, but for me, it's probably one of the ugliest bikes I've seen. With the deep wheels, I would still say it's not my favorite, but it'll still be in... It's still classed as a sexy bike. So I think paint schemes up, but there's small tweaks you can do to a bike to make any bike look nice. If you take, for instance, a classic steel frame, like your Moss, and you put really shallow wheels on, it looks one way. And some people really like that look. I like the look. But then if you put a set of deep section carbon wheels on it, the bike looks completely different. And other people like that. Bizarrely, I like that look as well. So I can't really decide.
But the point of what you're saying here is it's subjective.
Yes, it's perfectly something, and that's what I mean. What I would say is I think that's perfectly fine. As long as you accept that you like the bike because it looks nice. I've got loads of my customers buy aero bikes, and I keep saying like you definitely don't need an aero bike. You're struggling to ride at 17 miles an hour. Why are you riding an aero bike? But they're like, look at it, perfectly fine. You've got the money. Your kids aren't going hungry. Buy whatever you want.
Agreed. As long as you're not imposing your opinions about what's
and
cool
as long as
and
you're
not
telling,
other
don't go around telling other people their bikes are ugly to their faces because somebody saved a lot of money.
You're saying just do it behind their back?
No, but I mean like, no, you could think it's an ugly bike, but just, I find it, I got in a massive fight in the shop once because a guy came in and was telling somebody else his bikes are ugly. There was also a look back in the day, one where I had that funny stem. And I was like, this guy saved a lot of money to buy this bike. I mean, like now he's putting doubts and he's going to like, not like it. Anyway.
It is a very complex answer though, isn't it? Because it's more than just looks. So I think my Howler is probably the best example of it for me. My Howler is the most recent custom bike that I've made. And based on the person that I am now, just ticks so many boxes. The geometry, just thinking about the geometry makes me want to ride it because I know how it feels when I'm on it. Then I look at it and it's like the Batman of bikes, the Batmobile of bikes, and I absolutely love it. There's lots of stuff.
Your Howler bike's a good example again as well for me because I think the paint scheme is amazing. I think the top tube, the down tube, the way the 650B wheels integrate and it all looks really nice. The only thing I don't like about it as much, which I would change, is the seat stays. That's minor because they're thinner. And I know why Billy's done that because it makes the bike more comfortable and gives compliance, but I'd want them to be just as thick as the rest. But I said, that's such a minor detail, but that's the thing where everything's subjective and objective and some people can like certain things. I like a traditional frame, so I want my top tube to be level, not sloping, but loads of people like sloping. Some people like drop seat stays, but then other people go on the internet saying it's a hideous bike when it's got drop stays and they want classic lines. Like you want with that Sato Solar, you like that one because it's got a classic frame look. So I think it's going to be eras when you got into cycling, what kind of cycling you like. A lot of stuff's going to change it. The easiest way to make your bike look different is wheels though. Wheels and tires. He's asking about our bikes.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
What was he asking about our bikes?
What bikes have you ridden in the past that have made you feel something just on how they look?
I'm really excited about this.
Go on then.
Can I start?
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
So everybody knows that I love gravel. I ride gravel most of the time. I don't like road is a pure inconvenience for me personally. I know it's happy for other people to ride. But I got a phone call from an Italian man, Alessandro Battin, and he was showing me a new frame set they were going to release. It's called the Roma. And it's weird. I didn't think this would ever happen to me, but I saw the bike and I instantly fell in love. I bought one straight away. Even though knowing I don't like riding the road, I'm not going to ride on the road. I've bought a very expensive road bike, which is hopefully coming next 2 weeks. And I haven't been this excited. And actually, I can't remember the last time I've been this excited by a bike. And that's, it's...
You complained when... So Billy built my Howler bike. He's Howler Frameworks, good friend of mine. It took him something like 10 months to actually end up building my bike because he had other stuff to do, which I was very comfortable with. And you whinged about it. And you're probably on about 2 years waiting for this bike now. That is a gross exaggeration. But it is a long time you've been showing me pictures of this bike.
Yes, but and I wanted you to get your bike quickly so I could ride with you on gravel. But yeah, this bike, I'm just excited. And I think that this is probably what Ryan's on about. I am going to ride road more because of the bike and what it looks like, even though I prefer riding gravel. I've gone for a crazy color scheme on it and everything as well. And it's an Officine Battin Roma. And it's just, well, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's definitely mine.
So I would say my Grosier, as it's now become known, which is the one that's been hand illustrated by one of our pals, our tattoo artist pal Scott. I just love it. I love the paint job, the bike that it's built on was a prototype alloy bike for a brand that never happened. And the bike frame, the geometry is absolutely stunning, but just the bike isn't fantastic. So it really upsets me the couple of times I've built that up. And I'm like, oh, I love this bike. And then you ride it, you put a bit of power in, and it's just flexing all over the place. I'm like,
That's a good
so upset.
That's a good example where the geometry and everything can be right, but if the materials and it's alloy,
Yeah.
but it's also how it's put together.
Yeah, it's just not.
It just doesn't ride the same.
It's not a very good alloy bike. The
Like,
geometry is stunning. The paint job on it is stunning. It's just not very good, which is so upsetting. The Howler's based on the same or very comparable geometry, but for gravel, so it's got a super long wheelbase. That bike is just every time I look at that bike, I'm just like, yes. I was actually yesterday. I put my hill climb bike, leant it up against it, and I was like, right, winter's coming. It's Howler season. I was gonna tell you. I was gonna be like, right, okay, let's get going again. But I thought I'd save it for today.
Okay, thank you very much. We've talked for a while now, so I'm going to wrap it up. Please keep sending in your emails, stories, suggestions, and fun stuff to wildonespodcast@cademedia.co.uk.
That's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for coming and guesting with us, Nic Mechanic. You're not with us next week, but you might be with us later on in the year. Make sure you're following and or subscribing so you don't miss out on the next episode. Thank you and see you next week. Goodbye.
All right.
Bye.